If you have ever tried to incorporate the major pentatonic scale in your playing, then you might well have encountered the major pentatonic trick, which if you haven't, or just as a little refresher, goes something like this. To play the major pentatonic scale, you take a shape of your minor pentatonic scale and you just move it down 3 frets and voila, you have your major pentatonic scale. So if we're working in the trusty and beloved key of A, we would do something like take the first shape of our A minor pentatonic scale, and we just take that and transport it 3 frets down like this. And there we have the major pentatonic scale. End of lesson. Job's a good one. Good luck, guys. Take it easy. Well, guess what? It doesn't work. I'm not going to shout at you guys. Unfortunately, it does not work quite as simply as that. And actually, this major pentatonic trick, which a lot of people teach, and it kind of comes up all the time, I think it's taught with the best of intentions, but honestly, I find it super confusing for people, and I think it actually leads to a lot of frustration, which then often results in players getting super confused with the major pentatonic and retreating back to the comfort zone of the minor pentatonic scale, which, whilst beautiful, once you get that major pentatonic involved, it's adding a totally different spice into the mix, totally different flavor, and it's just going to do so much to lift your playing. So I want to show you today, number one, why that pentatonic trick is a little bit troublesome, and number two, a much, much better alternative for actually starting to get to grips with the major pentatonic scale in your playing. So let's dive into it. The first problem with this major pentatonic trick is kind of fundamental, and it's as follows. The shapes of the major and the minor pentatonic scale are exactly the same. So if you do take your minor pentatonic scale pattern 1, shape 1, and shift it down 3 frets, technically speaking, you do have the first shape of the major pentatonic scale. Nothing wrong with that. However, shapes don't tell the full story. When you shift that down, you are playing different notes, different intervals that have different qualities and that function in different ways. So what people, the first big kind of issue that people run into when they're trying to use this major pentatonic trick is that they take all of their minor blues licks, which sounds so cool and, bluesy, and they just shift them down 3 frets. And that does not really work. So let me show you a little bit what that would sound like. Starting first minor. So what I did there, and hopefully it sounded as spicy and as dissonant as I was hoping, is I took some of my go-to licks using the minor pentatonic scale, shape number 1, just shifted them down 3 frets using that little trick, and as you could see, the notes did not sound the same. The patterns of movement did not function in the same way, crucially because the points of tension and resolution have all changed. So to give you just one example of that, in that first shape of the minor pentatonic scale, this 7th fret on the D string is the note of A. That's the tonic note in the key of A, has a very strong sense of resolution, so every time I finish a phrase there, it sounds very logical and functions kind of beautifully. Down here, when I shift down into that first major pentatonic shape, that's no longer the note of A. It's no longer the tonic. The tonic is actually here. The A is the 2nd fret on the G string. So if I'm trying to do something like this, and we're playing in the key of A major, it's not going to go down very well. What I would need to do is something like this. Because there I'm resolving on the tonic. Just one very small, quick example, but hopefully it illustrates the bigger point. You cannot just take a shape, shift it somewhere else, and expect everything to function in the same way. And thinking in terms of this trick is really kind of encouraging that style of thinking, and then going to lead you to a whole load of wacky playing, because in your mind, you're probably thinking, hang on, I am playing the major pentatonic scale. I am using the scale. Why does it sound so horrible? Let me just retreat to the warm embrace of the familiar and forgiving minor pentatonic scale, which is fine, but then you get a little frustrated after a time because you're not moving beyond that minor pentatonic scale. That's the first big problem with this trick. The second big problem with this trick is that even if everything I just said was not true, and actually you could just do in that position exactly what you do in the first position of the minor pentatonic scale, do you really want to spend your life shifting up and down between those 3 frets in that way? So like, oh cool, yeah, minor pentatonic. Cool, major. Oh, back to minor. It's just never going to lead to a very smooth, fluid, or vocal style of playing. And it is honestly not the way that the scale is ever used in the blues. Typically in the blues, you're getting a combination of major and minor happening at the same time. So you get a little warmth, then a little kind of more bluesy melancholy feel, and those kind of 2 vibes are mixed together very, very smoothly and very cleverly through the playing. And this is, you're going to hear this all the time in B.B. King's playing, Eric Clapton's playing, Stevie Ray Vaughan's playing. It's everywhere, okay? So that's the second big mistake, is you always want to be thinking about what can you do in a given fixed position on the fretboard, not moving around, but actually, okay, I'm here, what can I do? Which brings me to the star of today's lesson, the better, more effective way of viewing this relationship and actually using it in your playing. So let's have a look at this in a bit more detail. If we accept that the relationship is true, so you take that first position and you move that back 3 frets, then what we've got is we've got a position where the first shape of the major pentatonic in the key of A is here. The order and the shapes of the scale are the same. So that means that the second shape of the pentatonic scale, the major pentatonic scale, is going to be here, like this. And that is the same position on the fretboard as we would play our very, very familiar minor pentatonic shape 1. So rather than thinking about the trick as a way of shifting back, we can take this starting point and think, okay, how do these 2 scales overlap in a position on the fretboard that is familiar to me? From there, you can then start to move beyond your minor pentatonic scale and target some of the new notes of the major. So rather than making that full shift from minor, major, back to minor, you can now start to think about, okay, let me start with minor and let me look at some of the overlapping notes from the major, because some of the notes of the scales are shared and some of the notes are individual to the minor, some of the notes are individual to the major. So if we look at kind of what's going on here, the new notes of the major pentatonic scale, if you like, would be the 7th fret on the low E string, the 4th fret on the A string, 4th fret on the D string, 4th and 6th frets on the G string, and then the 7th fret on both the B and the E string. Okay, all of the other notes of the major pentatonic scale already appear in the minor pentatonic scale. So those are our new notes that we're playing with. Now again, rather than trying to think, hey, I'm just going to try and solo in that major pentatonic shape, start with your minor pentatonic licks and then literally 1 note at a time, try and incorporate the major pentatonic sound. So let's take a familiar minor pentatonic lick, nice and straightforward, something like this. All minor pentatonic. What if we just change and target 1 note from the major? Let's target the 6th fret on that G string. You'd have something like this. And then we kind of keep extending that idea. Take another simple minor pentatonic phrase. And let's let's just target one new note from the major. And so on. Now, every time you do that, you start to get a sense of the sound of those new notes from the major, kind of what they're bringing into the mix, and you start to appreciate where they appear on the fretboard and how they cross over with the minor pentatonic scale. If you take that real nice and slow and just target literally one note at a time and build from there, you'll be absolutely amazed at, number one, how quickly you get to grips with the scale, and number two, how quickly you can actually incorporate it in the playing. Because if you just kind of jump a few steps on from there and you go, okay, I'm going to add in maybe 2 or 3 notes from the major pentatonic scale, then a familiar minor pentatonic scale like this, a riff like this, instead becomes something like this. Totally different flavor, totally different vibe, and a lot more of that major sound coming into the mix, which just was not possible if you take that kind of 3 frets back approach. If you try that out and you actually try and incorporate some of those major notes in, you're probably going to have a bit of a hit and miss experience. I've been playing with these 2 scales for a long time, so it kind of sounds and feels a little easy for me to get to grips with. But at first, and I can remember this myself, I'm like, what is going on? How do I play this note? Why is it not really working? What's going on? So that is a really big topic for us to kind of tackle together. I've got 2 full courses on that inside the Blues Club. There's more links on that below if you really want to kind of dive into this and dig into this in a lot more detail. But we can kind of help get started by thinking about the relationship between the major pentatonic notes, the new notes, and the regular kind of go-to notes that you're familiar with from the minor pentatonic scale. And the simple relationship here is that the new notes appear 1 fret lower than the familiar notes of the minor pentatonic scale. So for example, if we just take the G, B, and E strings, kind of very focused sort of lead guitar approach, we don't get so stressed out about the E, A, and D, then we've got the 4 and the 6th frets from the major pentatonic, and the minor pentatonic will be the 5 and the 7. And then the new notes on the B and the E strings from the major are the 7th fret. And in the minor, it's the 8th fret. Now, the way that I love to try and get into this, and I recommend players try and get into this, is by manipulating or moving from the major into the minor with slides, hammer-ons, pull-offs, and bends. So you can kind of create this little burst of major, then you can move into the familiar minor territory and create that very kind of bluesy, beautiful, melancholic sound. And you're going to feel comfortable because you're back in that minor territory. So something like this, for example. So what I was doing there is kind of taking some of those notes, taking the 5th fret on the B and the E, and just bending them up a semitone. And in each of those moments, I'm kind of targeting that major sound, but then moving back into the minor, and it sounds awesome. The other little connection that you can think about here is the minor third to the major third on that G string. So here you've got the 5th fret on the G string from the minor pentatonic, and that is the flat third. And then the 6th fret, you've got the major third from the major pentatonic. Now that sound is that kind of the movement between those 2 notes is really kind of the sound of the blues. Okay, those classic blues riffs are all coming from that manipulation from the minor pentatonic moving to the major. So that little note there, hammering on, bending, sliding, is another brilliant way of bringing that major pentatonic into the sound. Now, if this is something of interest and you guys want to learn more, let me know in the comments and I'll get more videos out on this topic, because it really is a very in-depth idea, and we can think about not just moving beyond this kind of point on the fretboard, but moving into all the different shapes. But for now, let's summarize. Let's bring this to a close and give you guys some actionable points to take away and use in your own playing. Because this, getting involved in the major is one of the big hurdles, I would say, for kind of intermediate players. You've nailed the minor pentatonic scale, you want the major sound, and it kind of all gets a little bit tangled up and a little bit tricky. So, number one, forget the major pentatonic trick and instead look for the way that the shapes overlap. So where you'll find the first shape of the minor pentatonic scale, you'll find the second shape of the major pentatonic scale. Where you'll find the second shape of the minor pentatonic scale, you'll find the third shape of the major pentatonic scale, and so on. And that relationship continues, and that relationship is the same in any key, not just in A. Second, once you've appreciated that point and you understand the way that the scales cross over, identify the new notes from the major pentatonic scale. And then try and incorporate them one by one into your licks. So always start from the comfort of the minor pentatonic scale, and one by one, try and bring a little bit of that major sound into the mix. And then the final step is, look at the way that the major pentatonic notes sit behind the minor pentatonic notes, or look at the relationship between those notes, because they kind of sit right next to one another. The overlap is very strong. And think about the way that you can move between those two tonalities using bends, slides, hammer-ons, pull-offs, all of that good stuff. It's a really cool way for you to get to grips with playing the scale, and it's going to sound really bluesy, and you're going to literally double, triple, quadruple your kind of repertoire of licks as soon as you start to pull that major sound in. But don't forget technique, okay? Technique is fundamental to making all of that happen. And really, my kind of closing point here is, number one, be patient, take a little bit of time. This is difficult to get to grips with, but if you are, you're quite methodical in the way that we've been in this lesson, look at the overlap, look at the notes, take it really slowly. You will start to get to grips with this, and then you can very easily spread it out over the fretboard and into different positions. And then number two, and kind of alongside that, never leave the minor pentatonic too far behind. The minor pentatonic is the foundation of the blues. As soon as you start to get new scales involved, the temptation is always to go 180. Yeah, now I'm going to go major pentatonic. It's all about the mix. So start and retain your kind of position as one of comfort. Think about minor pentatonic first, and then adding those new notes in. If you give that a go, I promise you'll have that kind of beautiful, warm, major sound in your playing in no time. That's it for today, guys. Good luck. And if you want to dive into this in more detail, you want to get all the kind of resources for this lesson and scale diagrams and all that good stuff, as well as access to full courses on the major pentatonic, how it works, the rules you've got to follow, how you play it over chord changes, and how you actually start to solo with the scale, click the link for the Blues Club below, and I hope to see you there. Nice one, guys. See you next time.